Welcome to my workspace. For today I'm bunked up in a hotel in London and I've been working on the data. I won't explain what I'm doing because hopefully you've watched the other videos so you know what I'm doing, but before I talk about this theme I just wanted to acknowledge something, which was when I did the original research I created all the data, and then when I did the data analysis I read through it and I was looking for emerging themes, so I was coding sort of particular themes, thinking about the question that I was asking, but allowing anything to emerge because that's the model I was following. And there were 5 sort of dominant different themes that came out of that first coding. And what was happening was every once in a while there was something in the data that felt really meaningful when you read back through it and was very clearly to do with me being autistic. And so I was just putting this is autism, this is an autistic thing here. And I didn't look at that theme when I wrote up my thesis because it wasn't relevant to answering the question that my doctoral work asked, and it felt odd to not write it up because it was so clearly there, and not mentioning it felt like you were hiding, like I was hiding an aspect of self. But the logic of not writing it up was very clear. I was asking a question in my doctoral research and it wasn't to do with answering that question. So the reason that I pitched to do a postdoc was because I wanted to honour that chunk of data that had been not hidden but not represented in the write-up to the thesis. And so my plan was to go back and look at those bits that I'd flagged up as like, this is clearly me being autistic here. But I've gone back through the data and read it all again. And this is going to sound like an obvious conclusion when I say it, but it wasn't obvious to me before I did it. But as you read through, all of it is to do with autistic experience because I was an autistic researcher and it was all my experience. So it's all autistic experience. And realising that it's like originally I was focused in on very particular bits, and that's drawn the focus out, and in drawing that focus out you pick up more stuff. And so theme number 3, which is what I'm supposed to be talking to you about, is one of those picked up more stuff type things, and it's to do with alternative communication. So the DSM-5 has a diagnostic framing of autism as have communication deficits. There's an element of you're not going to be great at communication within that framing. But in the notes in my fieldwork notes, in my data generated for the PhD, there are lots and lots of accounts of me engaged in communicative experiences through sound, through bodily connection, through rhythm, through all sorts of different sort of weird and wonderful ways. And the theoretical framing for that kind of communication is found in intensive interaction. So you're looking at Ninde and Hewitt and Trevarthen, and there's lots of it because I was using intensive interaction, and I've developed the methodological application of intensive interaction being with but if you kind of pull away and then look from an autistic angle, you find researchers like Hull et al. Talking about how autistic people report feeling exhausted by having to suppress their natural forms of communication, which might be more sensory, more embodied, more rhythmic. The pressure of masking, of performing these other forms of communication. And you kind of look at the two together and think, well, maybe it's not that I was good at intensive interaction in spite of being autistic. Maybe I thrive in alternative communication experiences because I'm autistic. So the theme is alternative communication, and the invitation or the challenge would be to have a broader framing of communication. If communication was viewed as relational knowing, or viewed as emerging or sensory, or some broader definition than, words and symbols, if you viewed me through that lens, you wouldn't put me in a deficit bracket as a communicator because I'm autistic. And you also wouldn't put the people with profound and multiple learning disabilities, profound intellectual and multiple disabilities with whom I worked, in a deficit bracket either, because although they don't have access to standardised forms of communication, their communicative skills are extraordinary. And I always think of the Raphael paper where the guy said he's not limited in his communication. He's an exceptionally skilled communicator who's using a limited set of resources to communicate a wide range of things. And I always think of people with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities as exceptionally skilled communicators. It's an alternative communication theme and an invitation to a broader understanding of communication.